Good evening. My name is Jeff Dolphin. I'm a master's student at the University of Wyoming and with the Kaprowski Conservation and Research Lab. I'm here to talk about my research here in Mongolia, specifically looking at the wildland-urban interface with wolves, feral dogs, and human dimensions in a UNESCO Biosphere reserve. My background, I've worked with wildlife for over 20 years. 10 of those years was with the Mexican Wolf Project in Arizona. I am currently working on my master's degree, as I said, at the University of Wyoming. Our research currently, we are cooperating with the Mongolian Academy of Science to conduct research here in the Bogd Khan protected area. And I'm specifically looking at wolves and feral dog interactions, but we also have research involving squirrels, Siberian marmots, and small mammals in the forests of Bogd Khan Mt. We are in the second season of field work here, and we started last year in the spring of 2022. And we are here in the spring of 2023 to continue this research into the second year. The wildland-urban interface, or WUI, are growing globally. There's been rapid urban development within the last 30 years. And by 2050, we expect to have 900 million more residents worldwide in urban areas. This will lead to increased wildland-urban interface zones, or WUIs. They're not very well studied at the moment, and the more research that we conduct on WUIs, we discover there's a lot of habitat loss. There's the potential for disease transfer between urban animals and wild animals. And there's also the increased possibilities of human-wildlife conflicts. WUIs are social ecological zones where research is needed to mitigate these consequences of growing areas of urban encroachment. And to help reduce human-wildlife conflicts. Ulaanbaatar and the wildland-urban interface that it has with Bogd Khan protected area is an interesting area specifically. Lying within Mongolia, which has the second lowest human population density in the world, there is quite a bit of wildlife in this protected zone. Bogd Khan Mt is also one of the oldest protected areas in the world. Historically, this area hosted 38% of the Mongolian mammal species. Currently, the apex predator in this biome or ecozone is the gray wolf. Bogd Khan Mt, as you can see on the map here, there's a satellite image on your right and a Landsat image on the left showing the cover of the forest, of the grasslands, of scrub and shrub, and in red you can see where the urban areas are encroaching into the protected area. The protected area is 417 square kilometers. Bogd Khan Biosphere was registered as UNESCO Biosphere in 1997. 58% of the mountain is forested. And as you can see to the north there in red, the urban area is encroaching into the protected area. Wolves and feral dogs have a unique interaction, or can have unique interactions with each other, being sympatric species and being able to interbreed with each other. Wolves specifically in Mongolia and in Bogd Khan Mt are facing a dual threat. The northern side of Bogd Khan, as I said, is experiencing rapid urban development and encroaching on the protected area. And despite Bogd Khan's officially protected status, wolves that live in and around the mountain are potentially at risk due to unregulated hunting, disease transmission, and hybridization with stray and feral dogs from Ulaanbaatar. As you can see in this picture there, or the second one, we have a wolf that we have gotten a picture of, and it has mange. And the lower picture looks to be a wolf-dog hybrid that we have gotten footage of on the mountain. Our research objectives are to understand the impact of neighboring urban areas on the wolf population in terms of their spatial distribution and possible interaction with stray and feral dogs. The second part of our research is to explore the traditional ecological knowledge to identify how locals directly or indirectly interact with wolves and feral dogs and what impacts they have on local domestic livestock. Spatial occurrence of wolves, dogs, and habitat determinants. There are three types of competition where we see wolves and stray or feral dogs. Typically, it's interference competition, which is spatial exclusion, harassment, or inter-guild predation. Could be potentially where dogs are forcing wolves out of their area, or wolves are forcing feral dogs out of the area, or one of the sympatric species is killing and predating the other. There's exploitive competition potentially, where they both are using the same resources, being wild ungulates as prey, or even domestic livestock. There's also apparent or competition potentially with differential sensitivity to a shared predator or parasite. For example, the wolf that I had in the previous picture has mange. The mange could have been there or in greater numbers in feral dog populations, and then inadvertently gotten into that wolf population where he has mange, or that particular wolf has mange now. The objectives that we have are to assess the occurrence of gray wolves in the Bogd Khan Mt biosphere, to understand the impact of the urban areas on the wolf population, and document any spatial overlap of wolves and feral dogs. Now, this is a warning, this is a little graphic, but we do have evidence before we started this project of dogs within Bogd Khan protected area, and these ones happen to be in the process of killing a roe deer. Also, we have wolves that appear to be in the urban areas of Ulaanbaatar, and we have evidence of this as indicated by this video, which is security footage from a camera, which appear to be two wolves walking down a street. So with this evidence, it appears that both species seem to be overlapping and using what we would think of as the other's territory. So this first part of our research, we are going to use trail cameras. We have set 3 grid arrays that are 3 kilometers by 8 kilometers rectangles. The grids follow the elevation gradient of the mountain, where one end is at the lowest part of the mountain and the other end terminates at the highest point 8 kilometers up the mountain. The cells are 1 kilometer by 1 kilometer. The survey points were selected by random stratified habitat design using the Landsat image map. 12 survey points are in each grid, and there's one spaced every 2 square kilometers. At each survey point, there are 2 cameras at each point 100 meters apart with no bait. There are 72 cameras total, and the cameras are active from anywhere from 30 to 90 days. Our first prediction that we have with this research project is that wolves will avoid urban areas because of human presence. Wolves are highly persecuted, and we think they have a healthy fear of people, and we predict them to stay away from the urban areas. Under certain conditions, wolves might be forced into these urban areas, but we expect that to be rare. Prediction 2, dog detection and occupancy will be affected by the distance from urban areas, where the dog presence will increase near the city, and dog presence will increase near livestock where there are herding or working livestock dogs. Our data analysis for this portion of the project will be a multi-species occupancy modeling. This will infer a pattern of dependence between the 2 species while accounting for imperfect detection. We want to test for dependence between species. Does species interaction vary along a gradient, like I was talking about the distance between urban areas, or as forest increases, the amount of forest increases? We can calculate the marginal occupancy and conditional occupancy probability when dogs are present or absent, or wolf or dog occupancy overlaps. We also want to assess the occurrence of wolves and what are the driving or more environmental gradients or interspecific interactions with dogs. Third prediction we have with wolves, with wolves and dogs is to reduce the interaction on their own, where these species might just know that they separate on their own, or they're active at different times, where dogs may be more active in the daytime and wolves may be more active at night. This may occur with higher spatial overlap with wolf-dog only in the wildlife-urban interface zone, or different temporal activity patterns between the species to avoid each other. My covariates that I want to use for testing the detection are the relative abundance of livestock, habitat, and relative abundance index for people. For livestock, we may either have more wolf detections or occupancy, or less, depending on if those livestock are heavily guarded and looked after, or if they're poorly guarded, they may attract wolves and we may see higher occupancy or detection because of this. The habitat class and the trap location is also important, where we may have more wolf detections and occupancy in the forest as opposed to an urban area. I expect detection to decrease with the more abundant and denser populated areas with people. With urban areas, I also expect a decrease in wolf occupancy, and we'll want to test for some other cover types. So we have grass. With forest, I expect occupancy to increase for wolves, and the distance to urban areas, as the distance increase, I'd expect wolf occupancy to increase. But as you can see there with the plus and minuses on the right-hand side, those are the effects that I predict with these covariates. After our first year of study with the camera traps, We've had wolves at over 19 locations, which are marked with all the orange and the white flags that you see here. But unfortunately, fortunately in this case, the only place we have dog detections are at the white flag areas. Now, this is harder to run the analysis for feral dog or stray dog occupancy, but this is also encouraging that we do not have dogs further into the protected area. So you could look at it positively as it doesn't appear that dogs are very far into the forest, given this first year of research from 2022. We have higher occupancy for wolves in forest at 0.82. And as the distance to urban areas, we also have an increase in wolf occupancy. We have a decrease in wolf occupancy with the higher relative abundance of humans. We have just done these preliminary results. And so with this second year of research we're conducting right now, we just want to either confirm these results, or we may get more data this year that changes these completely. So we will see if these numbers stay consistent this year. The results from our study, as from the first year and our preliminary results, is the detection of wolves and relative abundance of humans decreases as the human relative abundance increases. And as the distance is greater from urban areas, the occupancy of wolves also increases, which is one of the things we predicted. Wolf occupancy also increased as forest cover increased. Now, we did some activity patterns where we overlapped the temporal patterns of wolf and some of the possible prey species. And as you see here, we have roe deer and wolves from our camera traps, and they overlapped and were active at the same time about 82% of the time that we recorded. So it appears that the wolves may know this and are selecting roe deer from this information. With wild boar, wolves and wild boar overlapped about 70% of the time, which is also indicative of possibly being active when their prey is active. And over 78% of the time, wolf activity overlapped with red deer. So all three ungulates, they have some overlap. What's interesting is with cattle and wolves, they only overlapped about 45% of the time. And this could be due to the presence of herders being with their livestock or guard dogs with their livestock that cause this offset, which is a good thing. You don't want wolves eating domestic cattle. However, with horse and wolf overlap, they overlap 77% of the time, which could mean that the wolves see the horses as a prey source, or the horses aren't guarded as well as the cattle are. So those were our first year conclusions. And like I said, from this year's data, we will see if we confirm any of those numbers or reject or have to correct any of those numbers. Some of this information we can use to correct forest management and mitigate against urban encroachment for some recommendation of where to concentrate to prevent wolf livestock conflict. Or where there needs to be more management where there's stray or feral dogs. Part 2 of our research is we want to try and gather the traditional ecological knowledge of the Bogd Khan Mountain area. But not only the Bogd Khan Mountain area, but even outside of it. The traditional ecological knowledge, what we'd like to do with it, should influence and guide research, projects, and management strategies for the protected area. We hope to incorporate traditional ecological knowledge in wildlife management, which has been done in the past, but has been difficult in some areas. And it has been difficult because managers and researchers tend to be unfamiliar with the social science methods of gathering traditional ecological knowledge. And also cross-cultural interactions may also be present, which could present challenges of gathering this information. Mongolia is a country that has a strong traditional and nomadic or semi-nomadic way of life. It has an integrated social ecological perspective that is necessary to better understand the complex relationship between humans and nature. And wolves are key figures in Mongolian culture. Wolf harvests from 1921 to 1985 have fairly good records. Wolves are suspected of killing around 15,000 livestock a year in Mongolia. Post-1950 harvest reports averaged about 5,000 wolves per year being harvested in Mongolia. And according to the latest local IUCN Red List, Mongolian wolf population numbers around 10,000 individuals. What I've come across in some of the literature is that I have read where people have argued that the populations of wolves are decreasing due to unregulated hunting. The dominant perspective is a lot in Western journals and literature, and the population estimates are stated not to be accurate. And it is theorized that the decrease in wolf population is due to the increased export of wolf carcasses and parts. There's also a lot of literature that I have read where the local perspective in some areas of Mongolia show that is demonstrated or shown that the wolf population is actually increasing due to the stoppage of eradications and government-sponsored hunts. Out of 1,000 hunters surveyed in 2014, there were reported 1,750 wolves killed per the 1,000 hunters. It was still estimated, though, that year that 4,000 to 5,000 wolves were harvested, are still being harvested annually in Mongolia. Our objectives with this survey and gathering traditional ecological knowledge is to understand the human activities affecting the viability of wolves. What is the reason behind the killing of wolves, if any, near Bogd Khan Mt? Understand how species dynamics affect human livelihoods, and understand the cultural and ecological value that locals give to wolves in the area. Well, how we plan to gather this is to create a 3-part semi-structured survey, which we have done already, for rural residents, herders, and rangers, focusing on traditional beliefs, conflicts past and present with wolves or feral dogs, and the perceptions toward wolves and management practices of livestock herding. We want to attempt to interview as many people as possible. The survey that we have now is translated into Mongolian and in an electronic format. The questionnaires pertain to a broad demographic of people in Mongolia. It could be urban people, herders, hunters, Bogd Khan rangers, or government employees. So I'm interested in learning from everyone who would like to take a survey. The completed surveys will be compiled and translated into English by our colleagues at the Mongolian Academy of Sciences. Right now, on the screen, I have a QR code that's linked to the survey. It is in Mongolian, and if anybody would like to, I would encourage them to scan the code and take the survey and help us contribute to some of this ecological knowledge that we'd like to gather for this project. The next steps for this year are to work in conjunction with the Protected Area Administration and the Mongolian Academy of Sciences and continue that relationship. We want to incorporate local perspective and opinion into any final management plans. And in 2023 field season, we want to confirm that there's low dog to wolf occupancy in the areas we have cameras, and low dog-wolf conflict in these areas. And with that, I'd like to thank everybody for coming today. I'd like to thank the Mongolian Academy of Sciences that has continually worked very hard to implement these projects. There's a picture of the group of the Mammal Ecology Lab on the right. I'd like to thank the American Center for Mongolian Studies for part of my funding. I'd also like to thank the TWS chapter in Wyoming and the national chapter for grants and funding that I've received from them, the University of Wyoming, and the Hobbs School of Environment and Natural Resources at the University of Wyoming. I have a few videos that I'd like to show of wolves. Earlier I showed this wolf that had mange on camera, and we got some video that it is actually with another wolf, and that wolf appears to be nursing pups. It's a female. The next 4 videos I have are of a wolf den that we got some footage of. We got one of the animals, adults, walking through up here in this frame. Here we have 2 pups. There's a pup here, and we have this adult walking through down here. And then the last video is a night video where we got this pup on camera. This is all from the same camera. We were very fortunate to get this activity just by randomly placing a camera in the forest there on Bogd Khan Mt. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, do you have questions?
All right.
Okay, is there, what can you tell us about the number of wolves you see in this relatively small area?
That's a good question. So we're trying to figure occupancy, but from individual wolf detections, you have to, it helps to do abundance estimation if you have uniquely marked animals. And so these 2 animals here, one definitely has mange, and that's the only wolf that has that type of severe mange that we got on camera. And this wolf right here, he's unique because he's got this really white tail. So when I go through the photos and I look for these unique markings, I would suspect there's anywhere between 8 and 12 adult wolves in Bogd Khan Mt, which to me is a lot of wolves for only being in a 417 square kilometer area. Also, the number of wolves that indicated that they were breeding or produced pups last year, there was at least 2 breeding pairs. We got pups on 1 camera, and then there are possible other pairs that we either couldn't confirm they were nursing or had pups, which it's amazing to me because a 417 square kilometer area would in theory just be enough to harbor 1 wolf pack. But to have the potential of up to 2 or 3 breeding pairs in this small area is pretty interesting, and it may be that way because of the density of ungulates. There are very many red deer and roe deer and wild boar here, and that would enable the wolves to be at a dense level.
I guess the next natural question that arises from this many wolves is that do these wolves pose any danger to people or their livestock?
I would definitely say that they pose a danger to livestock in the area. We have conducted 34 surveys so far, and almost everyone that I talk to that has livestock around Bogd Khan Mountain in the valleys have lost multiple livestock just within the last 2 years from wolves. Mostly goats and sheep, and when they kill goats and sheep, it's usually like more than 2 or 3. Sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 10. And I did get one where a gentleman lost 5 horses. So definitely a danger to livestock, not so much a danger to people.
Would you say, are there any benefits of having wolves around the close to the city or in general?
I think to be able to keep the ecosystem healthy and intact, it is a benefit to preserve the wolves of Bogd Khan. And not only when you preserve the wolf species, you could think of it as an umbrella species, but that should also have an effect of protecting other animals that are there. So if we could keep the dogs out of the protected area, then we also save the wolves, we also save roe deer, we also save all the other animals that could be killed by dogs. So it benefits the ecology of the mountain to save these animals and save these wolves. You could look at it as maybe a ecotourism type of thing, maybe in the future, where you have such good wildlife that people can come and see wildlife in the future. In Bogd Khan Mountain, wolves are very cryptic, they're very difficult to see, but knowing that wolves are out there and maybe even able to hear them would maybe be a draw for people to come and visit the area.
In the grid map, it showed the wolf encounters and dog encounters as well. Are there any cases or have people noticed crossbreeding between dogs and wolves?
Some of the people that I have surveyed, the people can tell that I've talked to that they have seen hybrid wolf dogs by the way their tails are. On camera, I suspect that we have 2 hybrids that we were able to catch on camera. It's difficult to say how many hybrids you may have just by looking at an animal. You'd need more of a genetic test to determine if those animals are truly hybrids or not. For example, you may have an animal that's 95% wolf. It looks like a wolf, but it may have like 5% dog, domestic dog in there. But you will never know that just by looking at it. However, there are some individuals that definitely look different than some of the wolves we got. And as a demonstration, we have this wolf here, and we are fortunate enough to get on camera. And we have this wolf here at the bottom in this picture. And you can see that this one has like a short tail. The feet aren't as big. It has some different markings on its face and head, as opposed to the wolves, other wolves that we have on camera. To me, they don't look anything alike. You can see that this animal looks a little bit taller. You got larger feet here. The tail is a lot longer, and it looks more of what I expect a wolf to look like.
Are there problems from dog or wolf crossbreeding?
As far as we know right now, the potential is there. But I always kind of look at this project like this: in one of the oldest protected areas in the world, it's a shame to have like wolves, which are kind of a very powerful animal in Mongolian culture, lose those animals because of hybridization with the local feral domestic animals. But to the level that is occurring, I can only give you a guess at this point. Maybe if we get more unusual looking animals this year, maybe we can have a better guess. That was, I believe, in northeast UB. Yeah. It was actually like way out, like on the edge of the city, I believe, on this end. Yeah, northeast. Suhei, do you know where that video was? I don't know. That it's fascinating. Like, even if I mean, I don't suspect that those wolves came from the Bogd Khan area. I think they're like more on the edge of this city over there. But I wouldn't be afraid if I encountered those animals at night. But that's a very interesting question: is if wolves are coming into UB. How often are they doing it? What are they eating? What's bringing them into the city? There's a whole nother research, question there that would be very interesting. I found it interesting that we even had that video of them being on a security camera. So. Thank you.
Does your research only focus on wolves and dogs? Are you also tracking other animals?
My master's research focuses on just wolves and dogs, but we are also working with the Mongolian Academy of Sciences to do Siberian marmot population and occupancy estimation using a drone. And we're also working on projects to look at Eurasian red squirrels and using those as a type of indicator species to check the potential health of the forest. We also have small mammal research that is being conducted, and which I know small mammals don't sound like as glamorous and wonderful like as wolves, but one of the interesting things we have is we've gotten a lot of Pallas cats from Bogd Khan Mt. And generally these cats are in steppe, shrubby habitat. And we've been getting them in conifer and mixed conifer forests on the mountain. And the reason that they may be there is because of the diversity and the abundant small mammal population. And it's a real awesome cat. And we've been very fortunate enough to to get video and photos of them on the mountain. So it'd be really interesting to see what we get with the small mammal part of the research we're doing.
You mentioned that you are studying squirrels. Why study squirrels?
Squirrels, as many of you know here, people like to harvest the pine nuts that are in Bogd Khan and on Bogd Khan Mt. And with that, that's also a food resource for squirrels. So if you have lots of squirrels, you potentially have good forest production with those seeds and those pine cones. Not only are they eat those same pine nuts, but they also eat pine nuts of other trees. So if all those pine nuts that are being harvested aren't being fed on by squirrels, then what are the squirrels feeding on? And are those having impacts on other tree species? So the squirrel research is very fascinating and I say indicator species, depending on how well the squirrel population is doing, we may be able to tell more of what's happening with the forest as far as seed production, cone production goes with the tree species.
That's all we have.
Okay. Thank you for the questions, guys.
Thanks. Thank you, Jeff,
Yep.
for the presentation and answering the questions and the pictures and videos.
Yep, not at all. There's another one if you guys just want to sit and watch if we got time. You don't have to record this one, but this is just kind of shows a collated version of what we've captured over the year.
Squirrel.
Chipmunk, yeah. Yeah. Siberian chipmunk, I believe. Yeah, little wolf through there. There's a little water hole on this camera here. It was good. It was a draw for a lot of animals to come through there.
Is your camera covered by glass?
It's in a metal box with a lock on it, but then the box is like camouflaged, so it's supposed to blend into the tree or the landscape, so it's harder for animals, for people to see. This is the Eurasian red squirrel we're studying.
Well, I think the equipment question is also interesting. Can you tell us more about the cameras you use, how you place them, how you hide them? Do you need to hide them?
Not necessarily, but we place them at our survey points. We place them about 40 centimeters up off the ground. When we go and we place the cameras, we try to aim them either at a water source or a path in the forest where we think animals are going to walk through or across. And there's 2 cameras at each survey point, and they're 100 meters apart. They face opposite directions. So in theory, you're looking like in a full circle around those 100-meter areas. It's worked quite well, and you wouldn't think like just separating them 100 meters would be, you'd capture different wildlife, but there was one survey point where we had dogs on one camera and we had wolves on another, and they weren't on the other cameras, and they were just 100 meters apart. So that's kind of proved, the method has kind of proved itself. We've been pretty successful with it.
Can the animals smell the camera? Do you ask them to smell?
We generally don't consider that. And like that one red deer was sniffing it, and it may be able to smell us like on the camera, but generally we set them and walk away. There's a metal box with a security lock so nobody can take it. I've been very impressed that we've only had, I think, 1 or 2 cameras, like one was stolen, and I think one was damaged. And out of 72 cameras, that's been like very successful, that we haven't had that many issues with people damaging or stealing the cameras here. We put tags on them, indicating that it's part of a research project and who's conducting the research. So, but just to ensure, I mean, we always put locks on everything, so just to ensure the security of it.
See, kind of you begin to think about the logistics that go into such a study. How much time do you spend in the mountains? Do you go there every day? How many hours do you stay in the mountains?
That's a good question. For the cameras, we're very lucky to have the Mongolian Academy of Sciences working with us, because we'll have like 10 people go out and we can do a grid with 10 people doing about 3 or 4 survey points, and we get that done in a day. If that was just 2 people doing it, like it'd take us like the better part of 3 weeks probably to do all that. So the cooperation with MAS here is key to making sure all these projects work.
And you're also surveying people. Some of them, you said they have livestock. So they're spread around the mountains. You drive. You have local partners who drive around.
Yes, yes. We've tried to go completely around the mountain and contact as many people in the gears that are in the valleys there. And we've been doing a pretty good job of that. Generally, most of those areas are very accessible and easier to get to. So that really hasn't been difficult getting to those areas where people are hurting. The work up in the mountains requires quite a bit of hiking.
Do you feel like there are any hazards to hiking the mountains? You are potentially in a wolf territory.
You know, in the 10 or 12 years I've been working with wolves, I've never had a time where I've felt threatened or that a wolf was going to harm me. And I had a good picture. I was going to put it in the slide, but the show, but I didn't. And maybe I should for next time. But this is, in this picture here, this is a den. We were counting pups in a den in Arizona, and we do that every spring to get production. As I took this picture, the adults were in the forest about 50 meters, 20 to 50 meters away, and they were howling. They were howling and barking at us the entire time we were in there. But they never showed any type of aggression or tried to attack us like in any way. So I'm never afraid of wolves when I go into Bogd Khan Mountain. That last video, you could see the snow on the ground. Unfortunately for myself, like it's very icy, and I did slip and fall a couple of times while hiking. Those could be some of the dangers that I have to be more careful of, not concerning the wildlife. The terrain can be very treacherous.
So not the animal itself, but the
No.
terrain.
The terrain and my own clumsiness, yeah.
Okay. Well, that's kind of gives a bit more clarity to how things are done. But I don't think that normal people like us would be so raised to approach wolf beds where wolves inhabit.
it's just something like when you get experience with it, like the average person wouldn't know not to be afraid. But the last thing I'll say is Bogd Khan Mountain, like the wildlife is amazing there. Like it truly is. There's the ibex, there's red deer, roe deer, wild boar, there's sable, there's marten, there's badgers. Like it's truly amazing how the wildlife that's there. It's a very wonderful protected area.
Just one last question. In the beginning of the presentation, you talked about the increasing interface between urban areas and wild areas, and potential wildland and human contacts. Do you think it will also increase the chance of zoonotic diseases spreading?
Yeah, but well, there's always that risk of like spillover, and I'm not familiar with any zoonotic diseases in the wildlife populations here, other than things like like rabies and plague, potentially. I really think the biggest threat, right now are these feral dogs. We didn't have as many as we thought on camera, but we have that video of them killing a roe deer, so I believe some type of management or control of wildlife on the urban area is necessary to preserve this ecosystem.
Thank you for answering the questions, and I think with that, please go ahead.
Yes, sir.
I heard that a wolf searching food for about 20 kilometers, going 20 kilometers to 50 kilometers, I guess. And so, how was the route of Bogd Mountain involved? What do you think? The route?
So depending on if the wolves are able to get food close, which in Bogd Khan Mountain I believe they can, because there's so many wild animals there. But that is true. There is research in the Arctic where a wolf will go, I don't know the kilometers, but 60 miles out and then 60 miles back in 2 days just to feed the pups. But that's in an area where there's very little food and they have to go searching for it. I think the wolves on Bogd Khan Mountain can definitely travel far. And the map of the protected area here, if those pups grow up and in their first year decide to leave, on average, they'll disperse 60 miles. And if they disperse 60 miles anywhere from the center of this, it puts them anywhere out here. They can go completely outside of the protected area. So there's no way, I guess you could say, that you could like keep the wolves in there. I'm just impressed with the density that it appears that may be in this small area.
So I'm just interested that how big was the wolf you were seeing?
I can only guess, but I would have to guess about maybe 35 kilos, maybe at the most, 35 or 40 kilos at the most. And that I'm basing that guess off of literature and just based off of the sizes that we see. When I go to this site right here, I know roughly how tall those logs are in the background. So this wolf is actually quite tall, but yeah, I would have to say 35, 40 kilos maybe in size at the biggest.
So what you would recommend to hiking people in Bogd Khan Mt?
If you encounter a wolf and the wolf is either barking or howling in an area, the best thing to do is calmly just back away or walk out of that area. That's what I would guess would happen if somebody walked into an area where there were puppies or a den site. But I would say if you are ever attacked by a wolf, you should probably try to fight that animal off. But I kind of don't expect that to happen. It really seems to me that the wolves want to stay away from people as much as people want to stay away from the wolves in this particular area.
So when do they shift? When do they shift to the mountain to mountain?
When do the
Right. It's meaning that if they want to go to another mountain, how it can go without sea and
I would have to say it would go at night. We have very many pictures of wolves in the daytime, but again, once you get out of the protected zone, this grass, it's so open out here. And I would guess the wolves are easily seen and potentially killed once they're in a very visible area. And I believe the wolves know that. So if a wolf would change mountains, I would guess that it would travel at night to do so. Please continue, please continue.
is there any bear in Bogd Khan Mt?
No, no, and I was hoping for some species that we don't have a record of. In the back of my mind, I really wanted to get a wolverine, get a wolverine on camera. I just think that'd be really cool. But these cameras were out for a pretty long time and we covered a pretty big area. And if there was a bear there, I think we would have gotten a picture of it. Not impossible, but I believe we got all the animals. The rarest animal we had was a lynx, and we only had 2 records of a lynx out of all 72 of these cameras. So I think we were pretty fortunate to get that.
Was that a badger on the video footage?
Yeah, and we only had a few records of badger, but as I was early on in the project, but as we kind of looked through the data, we got a lot more badgers. There's a particular part of the mountain that seems like they seem to be pretty dense.
So, if there are no further questions, I think it's a good time to conclude our lecture today. And thank you all for coming in today. And also, thank you, Jeff, for making this presentation and presenting the data and your work in the Bogd Khan Mt. And I'm sure that this research will go on to inform policymakers, and we have better protection for the mountain and its ecosystem.
Thank you.